Hello everybody and welcome back to Manga Book Club. It is July 2024 and this month we have been reading Death Note, written by Tsugumi Oba and illustrated by Takeshi Obata. It originally ran between December 2003 and May 2006, and I gotta say, this was a blast this month. I blitzed through this manga in a couple of days because I didn't really want to put it down. This is a story that I've read before. It's been a couple of years since the last time I went through the manga, and I was interested to see how my opinions would change, as always coming back to something that I've read before. This was delightful. I think I enjoyed this more than I have previously. So let's just get straight into it because I'm eager to talk about this. So, Death Note. We start out with Ryuk dropping his book and then Light picking it up and all the events unfold. And you might expect like a nice slow sort of build into Light being this killer and sort of confronting, the ethics of what he'll do. No, that's not Light. Light immediately, as soon as he realizes the Death Note works, just starts wiping out criminals. He's got such a massive god complex from day one. As soon as he picks up the note, he's like, okay, cool. I'm God now. I love that. He's got such a big ego and it defines so much of his character. And it sets him up as this very strong character for other people to bounce off of and someone to really like sink our teeth into as the story goes on. We know he's got such a complex around him of being the smartest and he has to be the best. And so watching that sort of slowly unravel and the tensions that will be built up as L comes in, it's amazing. The first chapters are also very good at not exactly drip feeding, but being very intentional in the way that they explain the rules of the Death Note, where things are kind of brought in quite naturally. It never feels overly exposity, even in the sections where it is just Ryuk, expositing the details of the Death Note. The early chapters set up this magical gun that is the Death Note really well and shows, well, I suppose Light shows the evolution of the Death Note and Light learning about all the powers as we learn about it at the same time, like how he can control people before they die, or it doesn't just have to be heart attacks, he can kill them in suspicious ways. It's not just that either, it's also exploring Light through the exploration of the rules of the Death Note. What do I mean by that? Well, the ways that Light kills people and choosing to kill them by heart attacks so he is renowned to the world. It's communicating the rules of the Death Note, but what it's actually doing is exploring and deepening your idea of the character. We're getting a much better idea of this god complex that Light has. Also to mention on the rules of the Death Note, before I forget about this, at the end of the volumes, the rules are included, and especially when the rules start to develop and there's more like niche little bits and pieces and little like finagly terms and conditions, they're included at the end of each volume so you can kind of keep track of what they all are in specific detail. So Light has the book, he starts killing people, and naturally that causes him to get some real attention from the police and this genius detective known as, well, it's just L, the letter L. L starts off as a bit mysterious. He's hidden behind his letter. We don't really get to see his face until he comes to Japan to link up and create the task force to go after Light. All we really learn about him at the start is that he's like the world's greatest detective, and he is going to be the intellectual foil for Light through the series. And this rivalry is one of the two best things about Death Note. The two best things about Death Note. One is the mind games, and two is the rivalry between L and Light. So this first half of the manga, particularly around where Light and L meet face to face, this is both of those things. This is the peak of the manga, and it's nice and early to get you hooked in. Back to the chronology, back to the actual sequence of events. So Light has set himself up as this mysterious killer who is killing off criminals in an effort to try and remake society in a good image. He very quickly garners a following where people call him Kira, meaning God, and he's like, okay, yeah, cool, I like this. I can be called God. Nice. L sets a trap for Light by putting on this live show of a criminal named L. Lind Taylor pretending to be L. Light, in one of his stupider moves through the series, decides to kill L. Lind Taylor, and L now knows where Light is. Then things start to escalate with the FBI coming in, and Ray Penber comes in, and Ray Penber's wife is also there, whose name I forget because, I don't know, she's great. But all the while, Light has to find these clever ways to use the Death Note to hide his identity and try and assuage any suspicion that there is of him. And this is one of the things that caught me on the reread, because to my mind, going into the manga, I remembered it as this sort of cat and mouse game where L didn't really know who Kira was, but he only kind of suspected Light. On the reread, it's pretty obvious that L knows who Kira is. He knows Kira is Light. He just needs to prove it while not dying. But through the whole series, he knows. It's not a cat and mouse game of, oh, is it really this person? It's, no, I'm pretty sure it's you. I just need to figure out how so I can put you away. So things really come to a head where Light goes to college and he has someone else in the class beside him, a man named Ryuzaki, who is actually L. And here we go. We're in Death Note best part mode. There are going to be mind games and there is going to be this rivalry between L and Light. It culminates, of course, in the famous scene of the tennis match between the two of them, where they are both overthinking things and playing 5D chess, trying to figure out if they're allowed to win the game and what that means if someone wins. Like, oh my gosh, he could win the game, but if he wins the game, does that mean he's Kira? Or would Kira actually not win the game because he's playing 5D chess with me and I'm playing 5D? It's just so delightful to read because it's not just that the mind games are interesting, it's because the mind games are interesting on two very strong and competitive characters. It's such a delight to read. This is the part of the manga that has me really engaged, and things are still relatively small scale. There is Light versus L and the task force. Then Ryuk is flying around, who's not really on Light's team, but he kind of is. It's still in the space where it's this tight, intimate mind game between L and Light, and even the smallest of movements means massive implications. For me, this is the best part of the manga. I know as the manga goes on, the manga will continue to sort of expand and expand as the scope gets larger and more characters are introduced. Speaking of which, we meet our next main character not too far along, which is of course Misa Amane, who is the second Kira. Misa is obviously the less intellectually smart type of character, but she comes in with the eyes of the Shinigami because she made that deal, meaning that she's more powerful than Light. And so Light decides to, well, horribly manipulate the girl. And this is, okay, so full disclosure, I always remembered Misa as one of those uncomfortable manga characters who are weirdly romanticized whilst being like a high schooler, but no, she's college age. She's 21 at the start, I think, and she is older than Light through the whole series. And I guess assumed the worst because gestures broadly at other manga. Misa decides it would be a great idea if she televised herself, so she makes up a nice little video to publicize herself as Kira and send it to the world. It's a really good reveal in the manga as well, because we don't know about Misa until the police do, and the police figure it out. Because we're seeing this and we're like, oh, what's Light doing? This is a bit of a strangely bold play for him to make. And then all of a sudden, the cops that arrive on the scene just die immediately. So someone is watching them and killing them without knowing their names. So there must be someone else. And it's like, oh, what's going on here? I know the rules, but this isn't lining up to the rules. What's going on? And then we learn that there's this other character out there who's doing these murders. Nice little twist in there that sets up Misa. Misa's not entirely stupid either. She sets up the circumstances where she can go and find Light by looking for Ryuk, as she is the only one who can see him. And that's, I suppose, another thing to point out. One of my favorite things in manga is when you have a power system that stays relatively flat, but the manga, as the series goes on, finds new ways to use that power system in exciting ways. So if you've read Arjun, for example. Arjun is maybe my favorite example of an established power system, but then finding really creative ways to use it. And the villain in that series, we need to put it on the list at some point. You simply must read it. It's the villain just makes that series. But anyway, in the same way, Misa is using the established rules in clever ways to make the mind games work, and it's just so engaging to read along with. Eventually, of course, Misa and Light meet, and it's obviously a bit suspicious, and Elle is immediately like, okay, well, you're probably Kira, and she's probably Kira too. Okay, sweet as. I've solved the case. Now to figure out how you've done it. And that broadly sums up part one of part one. That's like the first half of the first half. The second half of the first half is this big counter strategy that Light has to not really get rid of his guilt, but more to kill off L. He's going to leverage Remy, that's the name, going to leverage Remy to kill off L in this. I think this is, dare I say, 6D chess. I think he's advanced to 6D chess with this move. Light and Misa renounce their death notes, which means they lose all of their memories of the times that they had it. Meaning Light is no longer Kira, he's just L in this big pursuit of trying to catch L. He's trying to catch himself, though he doesn't actually remember that. In the meantime, Light gives his death note to some big businessman who's going to keep killing criminals with the death note so he can cover up his dark dealings as he becomes an even bigger businessman. The whole business side of things and their company and bringing in these criminals to try and investigate these big business people, it's not really my cup of tea. I'm way more interested in this Light-L connection and seeing L trying to figure out just what the heck is happening. And also us trying to figure out what is Light actually doing? What's his plan here? But then the pieces start to fall into place and the pacing of this arc slowly gets a little bit faster until the end. It's this nice build of tension until eventually Misa gets the notebook and gets her memories back. With her trying to help out, things culminate with this big chase as they're trying to chase down the big business guy because big business guy has the death note and they know he's the killer and they're chasing after him. And then eventually they find the death note itself and it's taken into police custody. Light touches it and he gets this big grin on his face as he goes, "Everything according to plan." And you're like, oh my gosh, yes, what 5D plan have you done where this was all accounted for? Sorry, 6D chess. What he's done is that he's positioned Misa in a position where she will take the fall and she will be captured by L. The only way that can be stopped is if Rem decides to kill L himself. Of course, Rem ends up doing it, killing off himself and L, killing off both of the threats to Light, and Light cementing himself as the winner in this confrontation. It is so cathartic to read those pages and just to see Light's plan play out. Also, a great part of this whole plan is that the Death Note isn't really what kills L. The Death Note is kind of the vehicle by which the plan is done or is undergone, but how Light kills L is by leveraging the relationships in the scenario. He knows the people, he knows the characters that he's paired up with, and he knows he can leverage Rem to kill off both himself and L for him. Light is not just powerful because he has the Death Note, it's because he can think through these different relationships and find some clever solution through the mind games that will make him win. Real slick, real clever ending. But I think we've praised Death Note enough. Let's get into some real criticisms. I think this sort of ending to the first half, it's good, but it almost feels like a bit of an anticlimax because we don't really get a moment to sit with this moment. I know in my head, I thought this was an actual scene in the manga, but there's a scene in the anime, which I think is only in the Western version, where Light goes to L's grave and does a very cheesy maniacal laugh over the grave. And yeah, it's a bit stupid, like, okay, Light, that's maybe the most suspicious thing you could have done. But it's also a really climactic moment of closure to this battle and a moment to really sit with the victory, you know? Sit with that victory with Light and go, yes, enjoy the moment. The manga, I think, just kind of closes this moment a bit too quickly, and then we jump into the time skip and then into the second half of the manga without really having a moment to savor this victory because it is sweet. And since we're still, I guess, talking about more complainty side of the manga, the second half. There's really no way to kindly put that. The first half of the manga is really good. I said at the start, there are two things that really hold up this manga as something that is really amazing. The first one is the mind games, and the second one is this rivalry between L and Light. But now L is dead, and so one of our two pillars of engagement in the manga is gone. What's it replaced with? Well, we have two new characters who are very clearly described, actually, as the replacements of L. We have Mello and we have Nia. Nia is a more direct parallel to L, whereas Mello is more action and hands-on and get stuff done. It's just hard to separate these two characters from L, and the manga really reinforces the fact that these two are carrying on the will of L, and they keep referencing L and they keep going back to L. I think I've talked about this in a video before, but one of those things that really irk me is when you have a very strong, well-established character, and then something happens to them, they leave or they die, and then you bring in just someone else to try and fill that role, and they're just worse than what was before. That's Nia and Mello. Nia feels like a feels like a pretty much a copy of L, apart from he's into games and blocks for some reason. Mello does feel slightly different in the fact that they're not too concerned over the mind games and instead just decide to take action instead of waiting around. Either way, the pair of them live in the shadow of L because L has built up a very strong impression in the manga, and he is the character that we remember and the character that we really liked. And these two just can't really live up to that hype, especially when they are playing the exact same beats. We didn't want a cover band, we wanted the original. So we come into the second half of the manga. There's been a time skip, and in the time that has passed, the world has come to accept Kira. Most places have, at the very least. Some governments and a lot of companies are straight out just saying, yep, Kira's great, we love him, please don't kill me. Light has taken over the role of L and is kind of chasing himself and trying to prove to the world, oh no, we're still chasing him, but meanwhile actively hampering his own investigation. Things are really looking up for him. Then Nia and Mello make themselves known, and there is some new people trying to track him down. Now, the second half of the manga can kind of rinse and repeat the ideas of the first half. Ooh, here's a quirky detective trying to track down Kira, but is Light smart enough to outplay the detectives? Apart from this time, we're missing that rivalry because there never really feels like that strong rivalry between Nia and Light. This rivalry really exists on the coattails of the original rivalry. Ooh, but we can make it up by making it more exciting. We're going to America, and we're going to deal with books on missiles, and there's going to be another Shinigami to come down. Oh no, now Light's sister is kidnapped, and his dad dies. Okay, the last one with his dad dying, genuinely very interesting and good moment. The second half feels like it's trying to pivot and find its own footing, but it never quite does. So yeah, the second half is kind of where I start to check out on the manga. First half, amazing, great, so engaged. Second half, okay, we've been here before, let's just see where it goes and hope there are some good moments. There is the early confrontation with Mello as Mello does this big extravagant plan to try and get the notebook. The moment to really highlight is where Light's dad dies as he is fighting to get the notebook back. He is fighting for his family, and he is fighting the entire time for his son's innocence. And again, it's Light playing on that relationship that he has with his father, where his father is fighting for his innocence and Light is just playing with that and toying with him. It's so cruel and callous and the things that make Light interesting as a character. Then after the quote-unquote defeat of Mello, it begins the mind game battle between Light and Nia. Light has to bring in all these other people to try and keep suspicion off himself. He brings in a fanatic of his called Mikami. He also brings in this girl that he went to high school with named Kiyomi and uses them to try and make this new plan work to keep suspicion off himself. As things go on, eventually Nia calls for a meeting between Light's team and Nia's team, and this is going to be the big confrontation that the second half builds towards. This moment where the two sides meet and one of them will win somehow. There'll be some, what are we up to, 7D chess at this point about how one of their plans will work out. There's a number of chapters in between them announcing that they're going to meet up and the actual meetup itself, and I'm going to kind of gloss over them to get to that final ending moment in the warehouse. You've got Nia's team and you've got Light's team, and then Mikami comes to the door right on schedule, and he has the eyes, and he's ready to kill everyone in the room. Nia's team think they've already switched out the book, so nothing is going to happen. Light thinks he's one step ahead and has swapped the book back, so everyone is going to die apart from himself. And after 40 seconds, Light takes his triumphant gloat, and nothing happens. Okay, let me get the bad stuff out of the way before we can talk about how awesome this moment at the end is. So Nia's done this plan where he can swap out the book. So Mikami will come in and he'll write down the names and nothing will happen, but it'll be a pretty clear indication of who Kira is because Mikami won't write down Light's name. Okay, it's a plan, pretty bold plan, but all right, it works. And he fails. The plan didn't work, and only worked because Mello happened to do some stuff off screen. It really feels like Nia kind of bumbled his way into this victory and didn't really earn it. Because Light was one step ahead of him the whole time, it was just Mello did some stuff which threw everyone out of whack. In the end, it didn't feel like Light got outsmarted, he just kind of fumbled the ball at the last possible moment. So with the mind games aspect, Light's defeat didn't really feel that satisfying, and especially at the hands of Nia, someone I don't really care about that much. So Light's defeat is pretty unsatisfying if it didn't play out the way it played out. So I think the mind games aspect, it didn't really, tick my box by the end. But the characters came back in full swing to land this manga. My boy Light going into a complete and utter breakdown. My big, beautiful, egotistical main character is absolutely falling to pieces, and it's just so good. He tries to big brain his way out of the situation, but he's just crumbling, and then he tries to get his own piece of the Death Note to at least write Nia's name into it. Then he's shot by his own team because suspicions had got so high, and then there is the moment of Ryuk writing his name into the Death Note, and Light realizing he has 40 seconds to live before he dies, and the absolute implosion of the man. Love this moment. The second half is not my favorite, but the way this ends with this implosion of Light's character, it's fantastic. The manga ends so strong and leaves this as a manga that I heartily recommend. So Death Note this month, an absolute blast. This manga is still fantastic. I don't know where this sits. I think this is pretty high up for me. I don't know if it's top 10, but it would not be far off. You know, I'm a character boy first, and the rivalry between L and Kira is so strong, and watching Light develop and his god complex just grow and grow over the course of the series until he thinks he's untouchable, and then right at the end, watching that all fall apart as he dies at the hands of Ryuk. Amazing. I do feel like that second half is a bit slow to get through at times. It's not nearly as engaging as that first half, but when you get into that ending, it's all worth it. What are your thoughts? The comment section is open, and for next month in August, it looks like we'll be doing Kaiji. Kaiji has finally won. It's been doing second place for the past couple of months, and so finally it's won out. I'm excited to get into this. I haven't read it before, and I've heard very good things. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to mention for Death Note. I know it's controversial, but curious as to people's opinions. The Netflix movie. Good? Bad? Worth seeing? Let me know, because I haven't seen it before. I've seen some clips contextlessly, and do not really know what to think. So curious if it is worth the watch or not. Do let me know. Okay, that's been this month. Thank you everybody for joining me for Manga Book Club. This has been July. We will see you G's in the next one.